So, me and the dogs came into the studio today. I'm not riding around because here in Texas, it is currently 20 degrees outside. It is way too cold. So, we're hanging out here in the studio. I got my propane heater and I've got my Uggs. The Huskies are fine. They are warm. So I figured we're gonna do something a little different today. BMW just released their 2025 model R18s, and they did some upgrades and they changed some things, and I wanna talk about it. So let's get into it.
What does it take to design the ultimate soul-filled masterpiece?
So in early 2025, BMW released a new video to explain their updates and upgrades to their BMW R18 2025 models. If you're like me, I first learned about the BMW R18 when I came across the R18 concept. At the time, I had just had my motorcycle stolen, so I was without a motorcycle and I was looking at anything out there that was different that would just catch my eye. Initially, what led me to learning about the R18 concept was looking online at a Triumph bobber that was for sale, and I had never seen a bike with a stock floating seat out of the factory, and I decided to look more into how comfortable that bike was and what people thought of it. And everything that I came across when I started looking up floating seat bobbers led back to the debut of the BMW R18 concept. And there was some subtle videos of people riding it. As essentially I was interested in the Triumph, the only downside I could see to the Triumph was a small gas tank, and it was a very light bike, and I was coming from a Harley Sportster which already had a 3-gallon tank. And I was looking for something that could get me a little farther and also be a little bit more comfier on longer distance rides, but I didn't really need something that was like in the touring mode. I really wanted something that was gonna still be nimble, but be comfortable enough for me to do 50 miles a day round trip. Got interested in the R18 when it was debuted, and I still didn't have a bike. I ended up watching this video series that BMW put out, which was during COVID, and honestly, I think if it hadn't been released during COVID, they would have had a much larger rollout, and it would have been the talk of the auto world, the motorcycle world. Everybody would have known about it. Unfortunately, everybody locked in really negated the ability for an engineering feat such as the BMW R18 to really shine through and poke through. But I watched this series that BMW MotoRad put out called Bavarian Soul Story, which detailed the concept coming to life of the R18 and how they sent out the R18 engine to custom motorcycle builders to see what they could do with the engine and build their own frame and put it into their own bikes that they build. At the time, I was able to actually see one of the bike's engines in person inside of what the Revival Cycles called the Bird Cage. Beautiful looking bike. And that just intrigued me more, which led me down the rabbit hole to getting one of the first R18 first editions that was in America and then having it shipped to me here in Texas. Now, if you haven't watched the Bavarian Soul Story, it can seem a little produced, but there's a lot of exciting information when you get to see the world behind the scenes on how BMW makes the bike. And it is a good, interesting watch. One of the things that I have talked about specifically with my R18 is I didn't understand why my front fender was actually plain on the first edition when the rear fender and my tank both have the pinstriping over the black finish, but there's no pinstriping over the front. And something that I look at other brands like Indian that I've always loved is Indian motorcycles have that adornment, the little Indian headdress on the front. I'm a big fan of that. I love it. I wanted something like that. Just a little flash of something on the front to make it special. And it wasn't on the bike. Now I understand I do also like the stripped back look of the bike. It almost kind of brings me into the idea of it's a brat type motorcycle, very, very stripped down, just what it needs to be. And I do love that. Now for the 2025 R18 Classic, they actually added a little chrome part on it that I actually really wish that they had put on the original first edition. I think it really helps make the bike pop It's a very subtle thing, but it looks really good. And I wish there was one that they could add to the smaller fender, or make a smaller fender version, maybe aftermarket, that we can be able to add on. But as I've said in other videos, that is something that I looked at specifically, and that was just a me thing. Maybe either make it pinstripe or add an adornment, and that little adornment seems great to me. Something else that they included that I actually really like about Ducati's scramblers. So at the time of looking at the Triumph, I also looked at the Ducati Scrambler that had just come out. And one thing that really interested me about the Ducati Scrambler was the inclusion of a USB charging port underneath the seat. As somebody that was already filming themselves while riding but wasn't really releasing videos at the time, just doing it for my own purposes, I always had a camera with me. I always had other gear that I need to plug into USB ports to use for other things while I was traveling on the bike. A USB port makes a lot of sense, and on the new R18 Classic, they are featuring newly designed side covers and a USB charging port. Another thing that's really great about the new R18, they increased the rear wheel size from 16 inches to 18 inches specifically. And they couple that with a thicker foam seats for the stock solo seat. And the only thing that's starting to really affect me at the current moment, 4 years later, is the stock seat hurts my butt. I get a little pain in the tailbone, and honestly, I get a pain in my tailbone from the BMW logo. It's metal on the seat. I actually get pain from that specifically. I don't know if I just have a bony butt and I don't really have a big wide rear end, but in all fairness, I did ride the bike out quite a bit to make sure that it was going to be comfortable for me so I could really pinpoint the things that I wanted to change down the line. So I've ultimately been riding my BMW R18 stock for 4 years. Now I don't have any experience riding the bigger models like the Roctane Transcontinental or the R18B. As I understand, they have a handful of updates. They use an LED screen to access secondary functions, and there's favorite buttons on the handlebars that are now added to it so that you can get to buttons you program specifically for your case use as you're riding, which is cool. Like if you've ever used a camera, like a photography camera or a video camera, a lot of times they have favorite buttons that you can quickly access settings and things that you use more frequently. So it makes sense that they would have that like on a bike, which one thing that I don't know why they wouldn't have done that earlier, I had a BMW car that had a favorites button in the car. The seat and mirrors all adjusted to the way that driver had set it. If you set it on driver 2, it would completely change for that driver. Everything, all the lumbar support in the seat and the mirrors all changed altogether. It was awesome. So it makes sense that BMW would add that kind of feature onto their bikes as well. And I'm honestly surprised they just hadn't done it earlier. Overall, these new BMW R18 models look like they're absolutely gorgeous. I love the blacked out engine. I even like the completely blacked out looking bike. I honestly kind of wish that I had mine completely blacked out looking too. As someone that was never a fan of chrome, I actually liked the chrome on my first edition. I think the chrome on the first edition is a nice pop and is the kind of thing that makes people look and give a second look at the bike. If the bike was blacked out and I had been riding around for the past couple years, I think people would have easily looked past me. There is a lot of black bikes. The blacked out look is kind of overplayed now. Everybody had a blacked out version of something, and it's not as like striking anymore when you see it out. Now it's still cool. Everybody likes a black bike. I love a black bike. But having that old school look, the pinstripe on with the chrome accents, I get more people looking at me when I'm out riding than I ever did on any bike I've ever ridden in my life. I sit at red lights and I can see people looking at me from the side. And it's just a good feeling. BMW did something amazing with the R18. Well guys, if you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thank you guys for watching, and remember, pull hard, play hard.